Thanks again, Howard, and over to you.
Good. Well, thank you very much. I'm glad to see Graham's here, my architect friend. He's growing into the data architecture world, so love to have your feedback, Graham. Make sure you're going in the right direction.
I'm always in the right
And
direction.
yeah, let's talk about the data citizens. It's sort of the area that I like the most, and it's one of the areas that right from the beginning of my career, I remember joining Edgar's, meeting Veronica there. That was one of the great opportunities. But the most amazing thing that we found is we used to have these pub evenings on Tuesday. Those sort of things don't happen anymore, but we'd always go for drinks on Tuesday, and somehow or another I got connected with one of the lead or the top shoe sales managers for Edgar's. He was selling shoes, and I just really enjoyed listening to him talk about the business and what made it turn and what made it work. And since then, I've always just been interested in understanding the business, and it's certainly close to my heart in terms of, as data architects, as data governance people, how well connected are we to the business? What sort of difference are we making to the business, and how do we improve the life of the business? So I initially battled with, what does a data citizen have to do with data architecture? Isn't this the guy's enterprise architect and they dictate what's going on? And then the more I thought about it, the more I realized that they are the ones that get the business requirements for the data. They are the ones that explain the challenges we're having with data. They are the ones that tell us about the decisions that we need to make with data. And then it struck me that it's almost, they are the ones that connect me to the business, the data citizens that make use of the data. Graham, yes, that didn't take long.
Yeah, but you're describing in my mind a data steward to an extent.
Yeah, and I think it was, and I'll go and look for that. But if we think of the data champion, that who uses the data, it's not just the person who's got sort of responsibility for looking after the data, but it's also the person who's having to use data and having to derive answers and insights and questions and make decisions with data.
I hear you. The exposure I've had, for the most part, the data stewards are at that, let's call it the more technical, slightly lower level than the theoretical level, where they are just part of the business who utilize data. It's the, I'll say it in a nice way, it's the poor guy stuck between the technical SQL capabilities of drawing information out and what business is actually requiring, and is responsible for making it happen.
I'm glad you've brought that out, and that's why I didn't use the term data steward and have upgraded that to be a data citizen. And that upgrade means it's people that use data according to the rules of the organization. So that's why I haven't stuck it to a data steward.
For others, that was not a prompted question.
But I appreciate your. So last week we spoke about practice managers. This week we're talking about data citizens. Then we'll go on to professionals and then on to executives. So that's today we're dealing with the data citizens. And similar to last time, I'd just like to take you through the essential concepts. I'm not going to explain them all. We did a lot of this last week. Unless you have a question, Graham, if you have one, I'm certainly happy to stop and explain.
No, I'll stum now.
Okay. Okay, great. So this is the data architecture activities as defined by the DMBOK. Now, that was what we were dealing with in terms of our practice manager. That's what they were responsible for, establishing the data practice, the data architecture practice, designing the practice, and defining the roadmap. And there is where I've added the data citizens in terms of the data flows, the data value chains, the business architecture, and explaining that to us, and involved with the data strategies. Okay. So that's where I see the data citizens helping out and helping us understand what's going on in the business, and helping us do that mapping. Okay, so just to remind you of the deliverables that data architecture is responsible for, it's you can see that I've separated the enterprise data model and the enterprise data warehouse with the decision model, the data estate, which is almost the subject area model for the enterprise data model, the data strategy, and data products that are not part of that presentation. Okay, so the introduction, I just want to go through this, the blueprints. These are essential concepts. And then we had the data architecture practice manager that was responsible for establishing the data architecture practice. These were the areas we spoke about. And the data citizen is there in terms of understanding and providing us with business requirements that help us design the data architecture for the organization. Okay. Technology, and certainly they'll get involved with signing that off, but that's not really a main thing. And then what we did was, using the Zachman framework, we described the practice manager. This one was actually quite a nice discussion we had with Paul Krobler, and it was really just how do we interpret what is a list, for example, a list of the inventory definitions, what would we see there? And I've positioned the data citizen almost at the enterprise level, where they're involved in the inventory instantiation. So if we have a data model sitting in the inventory definition, for example, what sort of data do we have? We'd have data about a customer, and then we would have the inventory instantiation would mean this is actually a data asset or a data set containing customer data. Okay. So that's how we focus our data citizens. This is where the level that you're operating at. Okay, so that was just a quick overview of the essential concepts. Now, one of the things that I like about the data citizen is that it's about connecting us to the business architecture. And I like this diagram of the BizBlock. Remember, we spoke about the blueprints that business architecture give us. This is our knowledge base, and then we have the architecture scenarios that we work through. Now, I did a mapping of the data architecture deliverables to the data architecture knowledge base. Okay, and I always like to do this to understand what is it that I'm connecting with in terms of business architecture. Where are some of my mappings? And we can see here, I've got here something called the data stakeholders mapping over there. We've got the information, which is the enterprise data model. I like this one with decision and events. That's what the enterprise data warehouse needs to support. My measures and metrics is KPIs. I've got products and services. And if we are doing our job, we're delivering data products. And then we've got the implementation roadmap. Does that make sense? Do people see how and where we can connect with the business architecture?
Max here, I have a question. Do you see that the decision and event is mainly happening on the enterprise data warehouse side and not out on the
So what I'm talking more about is that my enterprise data warehouse should be getting as input to it from a design max, the decision and events that the business need to take and what I need to support on insights.
Okay.
So remember I mentioned that decision model. So what decisions are we providing insights for? And it will be an interesting discussion when we get to our data value chain in terms of why are we doing all of this? Okay, Max, does that answer your question?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, so now let's go down in terms of.
Sorry, Howard.
Yes, Paul. Yes.
Sorry, man. Maybe it's a really basic question.
I'm happy with those.
But just if you wouldn't mind giving me an example of your data products.
Oh,
and
okay.
services.
So this is always something that Infonomics, I don't know whether you guys have started seeing a lot of the work that's coming out in terms of how do we make economics out of the information that we have? How do we deliver value? Now there's two types of data products that we have. One is those products that we can sell. So the business gets economic benefit from a data product if we're able to sell the products that we build. So example of that, Paul, would be I can either have an extract of data, a data set that contains valuable information, or I could provide a Power BI report that allows business to analyze their data, and I could provide that service to them on a whatever form basis, on a daily basis, whether intraday, and they could analyze the data. And if I remember correctly, the environment that you were in, it would be from a travel point of view, it could be the reports around a travel engagement. So almost you had a data service practice, you were delivering reports. I don't think you ever translated that into money, if I'm correct, but that was part of the contract, and you probably sold it according to that. Does that?
Yeah, we did mature there in that a little bit and start looking at fancy reporting for certain individuals and companies that were over and above the included price for the service. So we did mature there slightly, but I didn't realize I didn't make that connection, and that's what and it's a great connection for me. So that's a product. Yeah, awesome. Thanks.
Okay, and we've got to start thinking more and more on that in terms of that. Debbie?
Hi, yeah, thanks. I'm just looking at value streams, and I wanted to ask why a business needs a value stream, or I mean, I understand, yeah, but
all right. So we all know that the business needs to develop or to deliver value to our customers, and a value stream is almost that part that's going to deliver on your value proposition. So the way you differentiate yourself in the market is first of all, you understand what your value proposition is to the different customers that you service, and then you design the value streams to ensure that you deliver value to the customer and you meet your value propositions. Okay, so it's and that's probably an interesting representation. I know Graham has spent quite a bit more time on the business architecture of the BizBot. You don't really see the value proposition or the objectives and goals as people refer them to. That's what we're here for, is we try to deliver on the value proposition to our customer. That's what attracts customers to us. Graham, any comments on your side?
No, I'm behaving myself tonight. Sorry. No, I'm in full agreement with you. It's the overlapping. I won't say the overlapping, but the sort of jigsaw puzzles from up and from down, if I can call it that, with the business and the business objectives at the sort of upper layer, and then data below, and they're starting to integrate, and you're starting to now see that even when you're looking at the totally from a data perspective, there's actually a business type value chain that exists within data. And I just think it's the personality or the way the people working in the data environment have been educated. They don't really see the business side of what they're doing. But once their eyes open, they suddenly realize, heck, and it's like what Paul was talking about right now. Heck, we've got something of value here. We are a business of our own. Adding value, maybe not externally, but adding value internally. And what are our value chains?
Right, and that's that's the core of this message today is what's our data value chain. But I'm glad you put your finger on the button. I appreciate that.
See why I keep quiet now.
Yeah, okay.
That's about a whole hour's speech.
Otherwise, you might as well do the talk. Excellent. Okay, fantastic. So, guys, this is how we map. So, if you're going to be building a data strategy, you need to know this. You need to know where you're connecting, and you need to know where your bits and pieces are going. And so, this is almost the hierarchy that I'd like to understand and I like to understand the elements of business architecture. So when I come in to do a data strategy, the first thing I'm wanting to do is talk to the EA enterprise business architects and start getting some of what they have for me. So for example, stakeholder analysis, man, that could save me a lot of time if I had a lot of that available, especially around the capabilities. So when I do my data strategy and I do a SWOT analysis, and then it's a case of I know who I need to talk to. And that saves me from getting my politics incorrect or falling over myself in that way. And then we have the value propositions, which goes to the delivery of value to the stakeholders. And I mean, it's the stakeholders are suppliers and people that receive value, and that can be both. It doesn't mean that it's just a customer. There can be suppliers that get value out of this as well. The value chain and items, the metrics. We then go down to the capability, the business capability, business concepts. That's the sort of term that the BA, the BizBoc uses for information concepts or elements like that. And then we have the business process. So these are the sort of elements that I like to have an understanding of when I engage with customers and start preparing the data architecture. All right, so just to give you guys some understanding of what this value stream is all about, and please, architects or anybody there that's not clear, please ask the question. And it's certainly, I've done this quite a few times on my data strategy course, and I sometimes get the feeling that people are not fully comprehending what it is all about, and we need to constantly talk about it. So we talk about the meta model of a value stream. It's nice to have that in your database so that you keep that and you keep that understanding all the time. When you build your data SWOT, it's understanding the drivers and the value stream that you're trying to achieve. What are your value items, and then the stages within your value chain or stream. So you can see that here's a sample value stream. I have a PDF that there was someone who did a really nice 101 on business architecture, and they've got all of these elements in there. So this comes out of the PDF, and I'll be more than happy to share that with you. So a customer approaches a business and needs, and the desire is that they have an uplifted workforce. Now, of course, I use this because we as Modelware, we do training. And that's the sort of, our customers will come to us and they want to upskill on their workforce or upskill on their capabilities. So they would come in, they would trigger a value stream. We would have to go and these are the different stages of the value stream. So we'd have to understand the training requirements, arrange logistics, register for the training session, deliver training, and then close the training session. Okay. And what I do like within some of these elements is that you can actually measure the flow or the rate at which you progress through the value stream, and you can measure where you lose business as well, right? So you may be really good at understanding the requirements, but you don't get the logistics right, or you don't get the content right, and then you don't get to the end, or it takes you too long and you start making money. It's a little bit like that pirate funnel that we spoke about when we spoke about the one metric that matters. So how do we measure the flow through the business? And it can happen at any level. It can happen at a departmental level. Each person can express the value that they provide, who are their customers, and you can see this flow and that's the value stream of train the workforce. Okay. And you can see here that we relate to information concepts. We deal with products, capabilities, and the outcomes. So the capabilities produce the outcomes. So what do I need to do to produce the outcome that is part of the value proposition? And these are the value items. Everyone comfortable with that? Any questions? This is core to what we need to do. And I think Graham was also talking about when we link the value chain to the business, the data value chain to the business value chain. JG.
Howard, just with respect to differentiating between stages and items. So with your diagram on the right-hand side, items, is this one stage, train workforce, and it has multiple items, or are there items and stages within this diagram, please?
So that's actually another nice question, JG. Thanks for answering that. And it's on the next slide. So you'll see these are the value items, all right, that are produced by that value stage that's within the value stream.
Cool, thanks, Howard. That hierarchy is really useful. Thank you.
Yeah, and this is really useful when you start bringing together your enterprise data model and your data warehouses. What is the metric that you can use to understand the flow through the stream, the rate of flow in a value stream? So that's, remember we spoke about it.
Howard, could you possibly just make that real for us with respect to modelware? What is your metric that you use to measure flow through your stream?
So we had that scenario of we have designed what we refer to as our North Star, which is recognized learning units. And we got some of those ideas from Spotify, which has listening units. What we have differentiated is we can, for example, we can engage and provide you with training like today. Now, that's fantastic. You've done the learning and things like that, but what recognition can you register from doing this training? So what did you benefit? What was your benefit out of doing the training? So we've got training units. So JG spent 1 hour on a webinar at this point in time. And then what was the value that was derived from that training, JG? So did you get the return on investment? If you spent 5 days in my data management course, were you able to use it afterwards? Were you able to deliver on a data product afterwards, on a data service? What is the value being to you for that education that we have provided?
Sure. Okay, Howard. So then it means that your value metric actually originates outside of what I would consider your bounded context as modelware, because it depends on whether your student was able to add value to their subsequent employer.
Yeah. So how do we measure? And this is the thing. How would I measure uplifted workforce? So that's the same for me. Is if I teach you and I train you for 5 days and you've paid $50 in your case. Did you get $50 worth it? Does it make a difference in your life?
It was well spent 50 rand.
Okay, Anna Maria, I see your hand go up. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. So I must admit, I've spent my life working in BI, and I've never recognized that this is what I need to be getting from my business, relating it to the architecture. So what am I helping you make? What decision am I helping you make? And if you look at marketing people, when they talk about the pirate funnel, and they start to understand what is preventing the person from buying a product, they look at all the different stages, they look at the value items, and then they start seeing where their drop-offs are, and now you can start measuring the business. So once you connect that, then it's, now I understand that I'm speaking the right language and I'm connecting with my business. Now, it's really hard for me. I mean, JG, I worked with you for 3-4 years building BI, and I never asked these questions.
Yeah, absolutely, Howard. I can't agree more with that approach in terms of making sure that you are collecting the metrics that matter, even if they aren't in your context. And you don't necessarily get them all. But I really feel like these are things that any BI project that has been shelved as a result of being challenged on its value add probably didn't go through this process well enough,
Now, when you get to an enterprise data warehouse and an enterprise data model is certainly one of those that there's lots of debate as to whether it's worth the while, the amount of hours that you spend on it. I remember talking to Steve Hoberman. He said he joined a company straight out of university, and and he spent 2 years on a data modeling on a data modeling project that was building an enterprise data model, and it was cancelled after 12 years. So they had 12 years of, in the region of five, I think it was about 8 people, and they cancelled it after 12 years. They just cancelled the enterprise data model, and we're seeing similar pressure on the data architects when it comes to an enterprise data model. What's the value? Now, let's take that into an enterprise data warehouse. If we know where these metrics are and the value items and things like that, and we can constantly show that our data is adding that value, we can show the benefit that people are getting out of an enterprise data warehouse. Okay. All right, so the nice thing as well that what I like to sort of teach the people about, I love finite state machines. I did my thesis on a finite state machine in object oriented in the 80s, and I love this idea of understanding the entry and exit conditions per stage. So how do we go in and out of these different areas? And then we start to measure, and we can start time stamping when these events happen so that we can exit and move along the chain. 1880, yeah, close. JJ, I was still on the ship. But, so again, this is detail that you must ask for as you're building. You got to start asking these questions, and then of course we have a map between the stakeholders and the value items. Now, this is invaluable when you start building a data strategy, because then what you're saying is, okay, Mr. Stakeholder, for example, a distribution partner, are you involved? This is the light green with develop a distribution partner relationship. These are the 2 people involved. Then I would then go and discuss with them, with their data citizens, what friction do you have with data in these areas? What is it? These are the people I would need to interview. I would need to understand what their strengths are, their weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And that's how I start to get my data strategy together. So data architects and data governance people building the data strategy, this information is critical to them. And then the stages that offer the value items. So really good to have that mapping and understand who it is that you're going to be talking to, which is the data citizen in these different areas, because sometimes it's no use going to the guy who owns it, who's the manager, and ask him, what are the problems do you have with data? They probably say, well, I can call a friend or I can call a data citizen, but I can't answer that question. They may have some idea, but in terms of the lack of insights that they're getting. Okay, so we've got our value stream at the top here with our stages. We then start to bring in our capabilities, and we must remember that our capabilities is what do we need to do to deliver on these things. And one of the areas that this diagram is a little bit weak in, showing how event management actually goes across multiple capability and multiple streams. So event management deals with logistics, training, delivering on that event management, and closing. So you can notice that it's almost across several stages within the value stream. Okay. All right, now what you're trying to do, of course, is from a data point of view, what you're trying to say is this is where my heat map is for the different data areas that I have across the capability map. Now, what you'll notice here is that you're getting levels of capabilities, and that's also important to be consistent across your departments or your different areas to evaluate at the right level of capability. Sorry, I think I've got a duplicate there. And then what you do is from that, you actually derive the information map. And Max, that was a little bit what we were talking about last week, and with Paul as well. Paul picked up on that is our information concepts that are involved. We've got that roadmap. We then sort of start identifying where our master data is and elements like that. And we can do, and that's what I do quite often, is I build almost a noun verb understanding of the capabilities that I've got at those different levels. So I can work through this different area, looking at the nouns, and I can start to develop my information concepts. And this is sort of what we get if you do that information map. You start to pick up on the core business concepts. This is your data estate. This is at a high level all the information that's required for you to deliver on your data. Okay, and then for each one of those concepts, what you're wanting to do is build a life cycle diagram to understand the life cycle of that diagram. And the nice thing, hopefully that you're seeing that, is that this life cycle diagram is connecting to the entry and exit conditions of your capabilities. Can people start to see that? Can you see how you can start mapping the life cycle on the training event with the capability that delivers on your business value chain? Because you've got the entry and exit conditions. Anyone not understanding? I'm hoping I'm not going too quickly or too slowly, as sometimes I feel I do.
I can't see it, Howard.
Okay, great. So if I take a training event, JG, and I break down what is the life cycle of a training event, all right, and I've got scheduled open. Now, that is going to be driven by the value chain, that value stream. Remember, these entry and exit conditions. Can you see that there's an exit condition? These things are well defined by a life cycle of your data, of your training event. Does that make sense, JG?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Howard. I didn't know which one you were linking it to. So
Yeah.
It's the exit entry criteria. Sorry, I had it as capability, and then I got lost. Thank you.
Correct. Okay, so the lovely thing about this is then you sort of understanding what capability is transforming your data and enriching your data and creating enhancements of your data. Now, what you certainly want to do is, from a business analysis point of view, is you want to make sure that along the value chain of your data and along the value chain is that you have capabilities and processes that take you from cradle to grave. Okay, so if you don't have a capability that's moving the training event data element along the life cycle, you've got a problem. You haven't completed your analysis. You've got a hole. So a life cycle diagram is very helpful for you to assess that your capabilities are complete, your processes are complete, which process is moving it from where to where. Do I have a process that touches every single one of these stages? If I don't, then I've got something missing in my business analysis. And the lovely thing I do with that is, for example, if I take a generic data lifecycle and one of the areas is dispose of the data, and I typically ask the business analyst, well, who's doing that? And then the question is, well, we don't know, we haven't spoken about it. I said, okay, that's part of the value that you get out of using a life cycle. All right, so this is, and I'd love to know just from you guys as to what your understanding is of a data value chain. If you wouldn't mind almost just typing in the chat box, what do you believe a data value chain is? And the interesting thing is that the DM book doesn't really define it. But if you look out on the internet, you get lots of different definitions. And there was some quite interesting discussions that we had on the LinkedIn post last week, where someone is saying that if you're not talking to me about my data, information, knowledge, wisdom transformation, then you're dealing with an outdated model or an outdated framework. So I'd like to ask you guys, what do you understand the data value chain to be? All right. So this is the possibilities. These are the different areas that I've seen people describe a data value chain as. A data value chain is the progression of data from collection to analytics. So you'll find so many of the big data guys, the big data vendors talking about the streaming or the ingestion of data, all the way through to the fancy analytics that you're doing on the other side. And they talk about the preparation, all those different areas until you get to analytics. And the claim is there that we're increasing the value of data, which I agree you are. I'm not disagreeing that you don't get value out of collecting data, but does it help you answer what? What is the decision that it's helping you answer? Yeah, that's a good question, Graham, is what is the wax that we're looking for? Then I've got someone who described as movement of data from supply of the data to the distribution. And then we've got another one is to perform higher levels of analytics with data. Then some people are talking about that DICWA, that data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. That's the value chain. So if you go from data, which are facts, and then you go to information, which is the context and knowledge and wisdom, that's the value chain that's increasing. Yeah, there is value in that. That's important. Some people talk about improving business understanding. Other people refer to this OODA loop, which is orientate yourself when you have an event, observe what's going on, make a decision, act, and then you go around, and data is there to help you with that process. And then there's another one is in terms of the progression of data along a value chain and the improvement in its ability to answer the business questions. Yeah, Kamal. So either you discover something or you answer a question, and the discovery is giving you insights around an effect that you're noticing on the business. So you may be noticing an effect that your customers are not finishing the training, as an example. Then you have to ask, you first of all look at what's happened, and then you say, why is it happening? And we'll take you through some of that progression. Okay, so now let's go through some of these different examples. I'm sure you guys have seen this. This is the data value chain. Some of the big data people, they talk about all the different elements of collecting, publishing, uptake of data, and then the impact, so the use, change, and reuse scenario. And that's, I mean, that's great. I'm not disagreeing with it. But who is this, where is this? How do we quantify this value? And how do we link it? Or are we just assuming that the business is going to get value? Now, the question I had for these scenarios, and I keep asking this question, is this looks a lot, to me, it looks a lot like a data lifecycle. I noticed they haven't got a disposal, which is also part of a value chain that's required for Papaya or your data privacy. So why have we not got disposal within this? Okay. So that's a view of it. Then we go into the related to supply and distribution, and I quite like this scenario of within our organization. This is actually quite helpful when you do a data privacy situation, and you can map who's supplying you with data and who do you distribute data to. And then it's helpful when you build those ropers and your data flow and your data lineage. So you can take it internally, and then you extend the value chain, and then you go into the big data scenario, and you can start looking at all of the different supply and distribution of data, and who are the stakeholders within that. Okay, now this is also another one where people map value to, and they say, well, all right, it's almost related to the type of analytics that I'm doing on the data. Okay. So look at what they're saying is that you're only really getting the big value when you're making intelligent actions. And yes, there's value to that. Do I need to go through predictive, prescriptive analytics? I don't believe so. If you've got a well-defined cause and effect, why do I need to predict and prescribe when I know how to do an action without any of these analytics? What is the value? I mean, I can do it, or I could almost use an if-then-else statement to understand how to make a digital decision. Do I need all of these things? Do I only get value when I get along that way? So certainly this is giving us more value, but it's not always the case. This was another approach that they've got in terms of the data, information, knowledge, and wisdom, and you can see the progression of data from facts to information, models to knowledge graphs, and there's more learning and stuff like that. And yes, that's true. But is that what it's all about? Is it just about getting to information and wisdom? I find a lot of these discussions are about, really just at sort of analytical approach or something like that. That's driving. So, and then is it about improving our understanding? So we looking at the evaluation, we understand the data, we then translate that into business understanding, and then we build more models, and we continue to go around this thing, and we constantly orientating ourselves, making decisions according to objectives. We're taking actions through systems, and then we observing what's happening. So there's certainly value to that, and I agree with it. Now, this is one, JG, you may have seen some of this in terms of the playbook, the CDO playbook that's on the go at the moment. That's with, shucks, I forget the name, Peter Jackson and Carolyn Carruthers. And they look at this data-driven, the dynamic data-driven transformation. I've enhanced this to be knowledge-driven as well. So I do believe there's lots of value when you start adding knowledge to the equation and not just stopping at the data level. And these were just some examples of what I've described, just a simple example to describe what's knowledge-driven and what's data-driven. Okay, so this is a presentation that I did some months ago. And this is what I'm saying. There's a more complete picture that yes, we are going from data, information, knowledge, and wisdom, and yes, it does map almost to what we can be doing and what questions we can be answering with these things. So you can notice how predictive analytics will describe what will happen. This is typically most of us are in this business intelligence and analytics. We can answer what happened and why did it happen. I do have some customers that are data disabled. Now, they probably not data disabled in all areas of the business, but they certainly, in sometimes the executive's view of data is that they do not trust the data and the information that they're receiving from the dashboards or whatever it is. They just can't run the business with that data. So they invest in understanding what's going on in the market and making those sort of gut feeling decisions. Now, what I'm trying to describe with this diagram is to show how, yes, we've got the deckway, yes, we've got the business questions, we've got different levels of analytics that we're providing to help us get to these different areas. And we've got this sophistication that I'm referring to as moving the organization from disabled to enabled. And a lot of the times everyone's calling us to get to data driven, but we still at this level and we're still stopping at this level. And I would just like to point out that you can't, one area on prescriptive is dependent on the results of the predictive, which is dependent on diagnostics, which is dependent on what happened. So you can't just go and start jumping into this area and trying to make sense of it all. For example, trying to understand what I don't know when I don't even have an understanding of what will happen, what should I do? You can't, it's just practically impossible. So you've got to take the people through the process. Of course, this is difficulty. This is an equation of the value that you're getting out, it's uplifting, and the maturity that one is looking at. Now, on the right-hand side, over and above this idea of being able to take you through the levels of answering questions, you also need techniques and methodologies to go through the process of answering the question, right? So an example of that would be probing and hypotheses. You have what's called a double OODA loop, and there's a whole lot of things that we can talk about, but are not really part of this situation. So, and I refer to this area over here as the data culture transformation. So how does the business and the culture of the business perceive that information? Okay, so I've sort of given you a background of all the different thoughts of a data value chain. what I like to show you here is we go back to the value stream that we were talking about with the value items. And now what I'm wanting to do is map and build my data value chain across my data concepts to map onto my business value chain. So I'm using these information concepts to map it to my business value chain. So this is sort of the scenario that I really liked in listening to the CDO playbook and working through the playbook, is what some people do is once they understand the metrics and they find out the area of the business area or the data area that's giving them the most problems, then what they do is they would focus on an area and try to uplift the area in particular. So an example of that, JG would know, I'm sorry I'm picking on JG, but customer lifetime. So you'd be looking at saying, can my business answer as what has happened to the customer? Why did it happen? What will happen? How long will they stay with us for? What should I do to improve the selling to the customer? So can you see that you can actually apply that transformation journey per business concept that you're working on? And Peter Jackson came up with a really nice example of what they used in the UK for the water industry, was that they picked up one of these areas in their data strategy, and they just worked on that area. And then when they were finished, they went to the next area. And after that, they went to the next area and the next area. Now, please, I'm not saying that it always starts in the beginning. It could start with a student, okay? And then you'd pick it up here and then decide, according to your metrics, which way should I go? Should I go and look at training data, or should I look at course evaluation? This is what I refer to as my data strategy and roadmap. That's what I'm building. And then I'm trying to get an overall understanding of my maturity along these levels. Okay. So this is what I refer to as my data sophistication journey. Are there any questions then? And then I'd just like to take you through an example of what I've built for some customers. Does anyone have a question there?
Howard?
Yes.
So just triggering something in the DM box about data requirements are your business requirements.
Yeah.
And so with that same thought in mind, that your data value chain is your business value chain, but just expressed, if I could say, or your perspective is a data perspective, your business information coming through rather than business concept or business capability. Or am I?
You see, I find that there's not just one answer to this. You know, it's also about the improvement of the maturity of the data within that area. So I'm almost looking at a diagonal increase of the value of my data. First of all, I'm saying, no, is it helping me improve the business value chain? But then also, at what level is it helping me? So I'm maturing up my data culture level. So I'm taking it from just facts to information to knowledge and wisdom. I may not need to go to all of the 4 levels. I could stop, for example, at knowledge and say, okay, I've undone the blockage, and I'm allowing the flow to go through. So let me go downstream and pick up the next one. Did I answer your question, Paul?
Yeah. Cool.
So
Thanks.
you're looking at several dimensions of the value of the data. And that's sort of what I'm trying to bring about in this discussion is there is no one right answer to it's from collection to analysis or from supplier to distributor. I think there's a combination of the answer.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
But I think also, sorry, something you've harped on forever since I've been listening to these webinars is that connection back to business. So yes, you've got all these data processes that contribute to the value of the data in your life cycles and your improvement strategies and your technologies and all that kind of thing. But ultimately, all of that stuff is all cool and great. But if it's not mapping back to your business and supporting the business in achieving business objectives, then can you really say that there's value coming through? The techie, if I can say, would speak high value of what he's done in terms of transforming that piece of data into something usable. Yeah. And that's as you say, because it's not just one answer. So that's right. but again, if that transformation doesn't translate back to understanding the business or making better decisions or driving a capability or helping even transform a capability, then what are we supporting? Are we supporting technology or are we supporting business?
Correct.
Mm.
Okay, so this was a image that Max put on, and this is I really like this. I must admit, I picked up that OODA loop almost about 10 years back. It was invented by a guy by the name of John Boyd, who was a Second World War II fighter pilot. And it is about reducing your time to action. So if you think of the 4 stages, observe, orientate, decide, act, if your loop is shorter than your competitors, you're picking up a change, you're orientating, you're deciding and acting, and then what happens is as you act, you have an impact on the market, and then your competitors are back into the observe. Oh, what happened? Oh, why did this happen? Oh, okay, why is my customer going there? And they keep on orientating themselves, or observing and orientating, but they're not getting to the action. Now, if you're not reducing your loop, other people are going to send you around in circles very quickly. Okay, so you've got to get this thing through. And yes, what Matt spoke about is the latency of the data. How long is it taking to get into your cubes, into your dashboard? Then the analytics in terms of how long does it take you to get an answer? And then the decision latency. So there are all those latencies, and you do need to pay attention to them. And all of those things are important in improving the value you deliver to the business. But I suppose what I'm trying to say is you've got to be measuring to your business value items and your value objectives and your value proposal. That's what's core. If you're connecting it, then you're in the right movie. Okay. Max, did that? I liked your diagram. That's also another aspect of how they can interpret the data value chain.
Yeah, and you did a good interpretation of the picture there. So
yeah,
and to tag along with what you presented here is that I mean we should never overdo things. So
yeah.
I mean putting advanced analytics on something that that might give you some additional insight for your decision, but you might not be. I mean, it might be enough with a simpler analytics for you to take a decision, and that might save you time.
Yeah, that's a very important point, and I think that's almost my appeal to almost CDOs and executives, and that is that if you don't give me a steer as to what value you want from your business, what your value proposition and your business value is, I can measure anything for you. I can give you answers, whatever answers is, are they going to make a difference to you? So we have to align ourselves, and almost the risk is misalignment between the value chain and the value proposition that the business have and the things that require them to deliver value, and some of our analytics and the data that we start collecting, and we start going into the wrong direction. All right, so just wanted to go through quickly. This was a value chain. I'm using the Porter model, and you notice that this is the business value chain that they've got. So at a regulatory point of view, there's the acts, the regulatory partners, and we can see the list of regulatory partners that we have. Then we go into the regulation, and then we go into supervision and then supervising how we're performing. We then have our stakeholders that are affected by the supervision and the regulation, and then we have the market. What is the market doing? So this is almost the value chain of a regulator. Sorry. Now, this is the corresponding data value, information value chain. So what information do I have about the law? And I must admit, this was the exciting one where you go into these big central banks, they've got all the laws, it's all in paper, but I don't have any direction in data with respect to those laws. Now, that's one thing, you have a law, but over and above the law, you've also got guidelines and policies that relate to it, and you need to be collecting that data. And then you're looking at what is the estate, the set of partners that you're working with. So there's no one regulator that deals with every single aspect of the economy. You're dealing with the people that manage the businesses, the tax, all of those type of areas. Then we get the regulation. That's where the act comes into play and all the fining. And then you get policies that are guidelines. On those policies, they're talking about economic concepts. And notice the value chain is that each one enriches the next one. Okay, so the policies enrich the regulation, which impact the partners that you go along. So you go through all of these different concepts all the way to the time that I'm getting economic data and I can start explaining what's happening to the economy. That's when I'm moving along this scenario. Okay, so just an example, notice the data estate. I put a very visual data estate, and then when I'd go and talk to people, we're going to say, okay, now we're talking about this aspect of data, this level here, it's about this entity, and it was really nice to bring these data models to life with the data estate. I really think there's tremendous value. And then we went to this next one, where we used the Porter model to say, what are the supporting activities for my data estate? What are the knowledge, skills, and competencies around data management? What's our demand? What's our enablers? And it was really nice to take through that Porter model and to describe your data value chain that you're working on. Okay, so this sort of is my call to the data citizens, different to what the data practice management has. I believe you've got one job, and that job is to make your data more sophisticated to answer more of your business questions. And that's it for me. I don't know if there are any questions or comments, observations.
Howard, Kamal here.
Yes, sir.
In the past, when I was involved in value chains, we'd reference a World Bank, right? To
Yes.
actually see what their value chains are so that we don't fabricate one.
Yeah.
That's the first part of it. So one of the key things they are propagating is that whatever you do in your value chain must align tightly with your vision, mission, and values.
Yeah, correct.
And normally for a 10-year period, so that you can actually grow in the areas that you need to grow and enable the business. So it's more, I want to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. That's certainly, and that's more part of what I have in terms of when I build a data strategy. I need to understand the vision and the values. And then I think I may even have something in here. I'm just trying to see, and I'm going ahead to, I don't have it on me. But you're 100% correct, is the value proposition must be related to your vision and values and your value discipline that you've chosen. And then what I like to do is when I design my data strategy vision or my vision for data, I want to be able to connect that into my business vision. So am I supporting the business vision? And the example of the regulator, one of the visions were that they wanted to ensure the regulatory landscape was working together. That was fantastic to be able to connect all those areas together, and that was a really nice steer. They also had something called policy harmonization, which was helpful for me to say, well, how do I harmonize my data to support policy harmonization? So it's critical that we have that value and vision.
Thanks.
Any other questions, observations? JG, sorry, Max.
Yeah, Max here. A bit out of the topic here, but we're talking about data, and there is a data mesh is something that is getting attraction to really move away a little bit from centralized enterprise
Yes.
data warehouse to more distribute, but still at the same time secure the enterprise
Yes.
modeling. So do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I'd actually, Kamal, we were talking with Kamal as well during this week, and he's on training, and we were talking about choosing the right operating model and the right level of federation. And then when you start to get into the idea of data lakes, is how do you keep all of this data coming together? And how do you then establish almost an enterprise value, but you need to be delivering value at your operating model level. So you almost decompose your high level value chain with value chains and strategic focus areas by department, and then you're going to be then focusing on the appropriate sharing of data and making that data available to others that are downstream the big value chain. So you can get these hierarchies of value chain, and then you need to ensure that people are enhancing the value chain for the next department and the next area and bringing all of this data together. And I'm finding a lot more that people are getting nervous of these big centralized data offices, and they decentralizing more of their data. But it's then about how do we bring it back together. And one of my feelings was that we should be using some of the open data platform techniques where we're using lots of metadata to understand where this data is, and to have these search engines of finding the right data and being able to connect and share the data appropriately. So I find those techniques very helpful. And the DCAT, so they're developing ways of integrating the data but not integrating the data. And the next level of discussion you go into with data architecture is send the algorithm to the data, don't try to collect the data. So we've got to start rethinking that we're building this bigger and bigger monstrosity of data. But why should we do that? We're getting ourselves into trouble. Sometimes we can actually just send the algorithm to a data, an area, and get them to give us the answer. We typically or hopefully won't get into any challenges on that because the answer is 22 or 44. I mean, it could be more complicated. 42. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that was a good input to my own thinking around it.
Okay.
Because I think some part of the BA is that sometimes they're seen as a unicorn in the organization. The source system don't really understand why they need to give away all the data to this centralized center and what benefit they get back. So
yeah, we had this. Sure, you remind you, bringing back memories, Max. One customer we had, they came up with this single door policy. There's a single door in and a single door out, and they were going to control everything through the single door. And in some cases it made sense, but it just, the politics got the better of them. I know master data suffers from those politics, and everyone would like to have that spreadsheet or that element that they can do work on, and it's just silos are with us. You know, the fragmentation's there. Applications cause fragmentation. So I think we need to better find easier and simpler ways of sharing and connecting and making data transparent, rather than trying to bring everything back into the one big mainframe again.
Yeah, especially now when there is so, I mean, earlier, we didn't have so much data, but now we are actually flooded by data.
I was looking at the National Credit Bureau in Germany, and there's an area in Spain and Germany. And Germany said, we're not going down this route. There's too much data. The granularity is too low. The possibilities of privacy issues were too high. Spain took a completely opposite way and saying, we want as much data as possible, and we'll see how that comes out. Data virtualization, David, I do like that. There was a really nice area on data-centric architecture. A lot of that is about data virtualization, where you can build a memory model. And the nice thing about that memory model is that you can actually issue queries both locally and remotely to get the data that you need and only when you need it. So the engine underneath it will go and query go and make the appropriate queries to curated data sets or whatever it is, and you don't have to force everything together. So data virtualization is certainly a way of bringing some of that together.
Yes.
It's a very, what I'm finding is I like that virtualization thing. And I found that the most benefit that my customers have got that I'm working on is a lot of the times the prototyping, the ability to put the data together, see what it is, and things like that. Whether we can get all of our data into memory, there's still some challenges on that, and people have to do quite a bit of fixing on that side. But the speed at which you can build your data models, virtualize it, issue the queries, I think it's fantastic.
And I suppose, Maxi, again, if we have a distributed responsibility where they have some kind of harmony by centralized glossary with defined terms, but
Yeah.
the actual model are distributed, and then using virtualization to pull things together.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Good.
You know what I'll actually do, Max, thanks for bringing that up. I'll bring in some of those ideas on data-centric architecture. They make use of ontologies, which are, they glossaries on steroids, several levels of semantic understanding higher up. They use a core ontology, and then they extend the ontology to the different domains. So and then there's always a mapping back to the core ontology. So I'll bring it in next week.
Cool, thank you.
There's a really nice way that some of the guys, David McComb, has put together. I really like the work that he's doing.
I look forward for that, because that is something that I actually believe in, because then that will then make the providers responsible for the data and take a holistic responsibility.
Yeah. And it is that ability of keeping the core tidy and then extending where it is and not making one big massive model that sorts everything out and things like that. Any other questions, guys? I know Graham went quiet. Did he leave us?
No, I got staying power.
Graham, what are your insights? I mean, I know you work a lot more at the architectural level, and you and I have been talking some time of helping the data people connect up to the business architecture and not just living at a data level. Have you got any insights on that?
No, I wouldn't call it insights, but I think we're on the right track, right path. I'm fully in agreement that these two practices should be overlapping and each understanding what the other is doing. And especially if I look at it, I just put on the architect or the data mindset or data focus to suddenly see how business works, why business works, what value you can add to business. It opens your eyes up to all the things that you could be doing as shall we, let's say, soft value adds. And if I then turn the hat inside out and go the other way, if you're looking at it from the business perspective, when you're busy saying you're wanting to do something, you want to add some sort of process or you want to perform something in business, it would be great to think about, well, what data do we need? What information should we have here? Because quite often you sit and you have to put the brakes on an executive's great idea because he says, oh, we're going to draw this report and see this and we're going to integrate that and we're going to do this. And you say, yeah, that's nice. You've never ever had that data in the last 10 years, but you'll get it in the next 6 or 7 working days and we'll have this brilliant BR dashboard on it.
Yeah, it's nice to have that data estate and then to almost have metrics on your data estate in terms of your coverage. and the value that your data is at in terms of the DICWA as well. So there's all these different metrics that talk about the latency, that talk about the value, that talk about these different ways of assessing your ability to deliver business value.
Yeah, I just think that it's nice to know, be able to see from both sides of the same sort of data coin, or both sides of the issue. Gives you a lot more strength.
But I think that's where I find it's important to have those citizens on your side, and to get them involved, and to explain the steer that you're looking for.
I think they'll probably be the easiest people to get on your side, to be honest, because they are using and understanding, and these sort of discussions with them would be such an eye opener and a value add, just to see that there's somebody trying to understand their world and trying to see how to make value out of it, and willing to expose our world, the other two-way street, to each teach each other. So we both get little gold stars from management when we actually deliver something.
Yeah, I must admit, I have battled in some cases where they don't always see. We had a scenario with one customer who walked in, they were having serious problems with their BI, and everything was falling over, and it's just a case of, well, I don't want to go in and start fixing this right away when I believe the problems are wider in terms of the application, in terms of understanding what it is that you're doing, how you're delivering it, and when they hear that, then it's like, whoa, hold on. All I want you to do is fix this little problem here.
Yeah, scratch the itch. Don't work out what the problem is. Yes.
Cool. Graham, thank you very much. Paul, Bolton, all yours.
Thanks, guys. Howard, thank you so much. Really eye-opener. Thanks for me as well. Just learned so much today again. And thanks, everybody, for participating in all comments and contributions. Brilliant. Looking forward to next week.
Thanks.
No pressure, Howard.
Yeah, I put myself into that one. Max got me there.
Yeah. Sure. No, but brilliant. Great contribution, Max. Thank you so much.
Excellent.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers,
Thank
everybody.
you.